Parents are stunned when their twins are born with white hair. Then they discover why. It was a cold winter morning when Sarah and John's lives changed forever. After months of anticipation, excitement, and preparation, the moment had finally arrived: the birth of their twins. Sarah had gone through a long and exhausting labor, but as soon as she heard the first cries of her newborn daughters, every ounce of pain melted away. John was right by her side, holding her hand, overwhelmed with joy and relief that their babies had arrived safely. The delivery room was filled with the usual flurry of activity. Nurses moving swiftly, doctors giving orders, and machines quietly beeping in the background. But amidst all the chaos, something happened that made the room fall silent. As the nurses gently cleaned the twins and brought them over to Sarah and John, everyone stopped in their tracks. The babies were beautiful, healthy, and perfect in every way. But there was one feature that left everyone stunned: their hair. Welcome back to PlotTwister. Before we unravel today's mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you're always in the loop. Both girls were born with thick, pure white hair. Not the soft blonde or light brown most newborns might have, but snow white. It stood out starkly against their rosy skin. The room, which had been bustling just moments before, suddenly grew still as the doctors and nurses exchanged glances. Sarah and John could hardly believe their eyes. They had expected the usual newborn look, perhaps some soft fuzz on their heads, or even no hair at all. But this was unlike anything they had imagined. The twins lay peacefully in their mother's arms, oblivious to the reactions around them. Sarah, exhausted but glowing with happiness, looked down at her daughters in awe. She traced her fingers gently through their hair, not knowing what to make of it. John leaned in closer, his brow furrowed, still processing what he was seeing. This wasn't something they had ever discussed or prepared for. Neither of their families had any history of such a trait. It wasn't long before the medical staff started whispering among themselves. Was this normal? Could there be a medical reason behind it? But for Sarah and John, the only thing that mattered was that their daughters were healthy. Still, the question lingered: why did they have such white hair? And what could it possibly mean? The first few days in the hospital were a blur for Sarah and John. Between feedings, diaper changes, and the general chaos of newborn twins, there was little time to think. But one question kept nagging at the back of their minds: why did their daughters have white hair? Nurses and doctors came in and out checking on the babies, but no one had a clear answer. Every time Sarah asked about it, she was met with puzzled expressions and vague reassurances. The babies were perfectly healthy, the doctor said, and that's what really mattered. Still, the curiosity lingered. Sarah and John couldn't shake the feeling that something was unusual. Was it genetic? Neither of their families had any history of any kind of trait. Sarah remembered asking her mother if anyone in their family had been born with white hair, but the answer was always no. John did the same with his parents, but the response was identical. No one could recall a single relative with anything remotely like this. After a couple of days, the doctor suggested running a series of genetic tests, just to be sure there were no underlying conditions. It wasn't something Sarah and John had planned on, but they agreed. The thought of something being wrong with their babies was terrifying, but they needed to know. The waiting was the hardest part. Sarah spent hours holding her gifts, looking down at their peaceful faces, trying not to let her mind wander to worst-case scenarios. John was quiet, his worry clear, but he never left Sarah's side. Every time a doctor or nurse entered the room, they braced themselves for news. Finally, the results came back. The twins were completely healthy. No signs of albinism, no medical conditions to explain the white hair. Sarah and John breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the mystery was still there. There was no clear explanation, only more questions. Even the doctors were at loss. It seemed that for now the only answer was that the twins were unique in a way no one could explain. Back home, Sarah and John shared the news with family and friends, hoping someone might have some insight. But much like the doctors, everyone was as puzzled as they were. The mystery of the twins' white hair remained unsolved. Bringing the twins home was a moment Sarah and John had dreamed about for months. The house was filled with soft baby clothes, diapers neatly stacked, and everything ready for the arrival of Lily and Rose. As they walked through the door, Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. They were home, and despite the lingering questions about their hair, her babies were safe and healthy. Life with newborns, especially twins, was a whirlwind. The nights were long and filled with crying, feeding, and diaper changes, but every time Sarah or John looked down at their daughters, their white hair glimmered in the soft light of the nursery. They couldn't help but feel like they were witnessing something extraordinary. The babies, despite the exhaustion they brought, were peaceful most of the time, and watching them sleep became a favorite pastime for their parents. As the days went by, word spread quickly through their neighborhood and among friends. Everyone wanted to come by and see the twins, not just because they were newborns, but because of their striking appearance. Family and friends would stop by, marveling at the girls' white hair. Questions were constant. Had they found any explanation yet? Was there a reason behind it? Sarah and John had no new answers to offer, but they found themselves growing used to the attention. It was clear that Lily and Rose were unlike any babies anyone had ever seen. Even trips outside the house became a spectacle. On their first outing to the local grocery store, people stopped them in the aisles, staring at the babies in their stroller. One older woman leaned in close and said, "I've never seen anything like that before. They're absolutely beautiful." Sarah smiled politely, but she could feel the tension building. It wasn't just curiosity, it was the sense that they were part of something bigger, something that still hadn't revealed itself. As the weeks passed, the babies grew strong, and their bond with each other was undeniable. Lily and Rose were inseparable, always reaching out for each other, even in their sleep. Sarah and John watched with awe as their baby shared this unique connection, but even in the joy of those early days, the mystery of their white hair hung over them, a question that refused to be answered. As the days turned into weeks, the mystery of Lily and Rose's white hair lingered in Sarah and John's minds. They couldn't help but feel there was more to this than they understood. The medical tests had ruled out anything concerning, but the absence of answers only deepened their sense that their daughters were somehow different. It was a feeling that began to weigh on them, pushing them to look for meaning in places they hadn't considered before. One afternoon, while the twins napped, Sarah sat with her mother, sipping tea at the kitchen table. Her mother had always been a source of comfort, and Sarah found herself opening up about the growing feeling she had. She explained how every time she looked at Lily and Rose, especially when the sunlight caught their white hair just right, she felt a strange sense of peace. Her mother listened quietly, then gently suggested that perhaps this was more than just genetics or coincidence. Maybe, she said, there was something spiritual at work. That evening, Sarah and John spoke about it for the first time. Neither of them had ever been overly religious, but faith had always been part of their lives. Now, with this mystery hanging over their heads, they began to wonder if there was a deeper reason for their daughter's unusual appearance. John, who had been silently carrying his own thoughts, admitted that he, too, had felt something unusual. He had noticed how calm the twins were, how they seemed to have a quiet, almost serene presence about them. A few days later, they visited their pastor seeking guidance. He listened as they spoke about the twins and the overwhelming sense of mystery surrounding them. The pastor smiled warmly and told them that sometimes the things we don't understand are part of a greater plan. He spoke about blessings that come in unexpected forms and how, in the eyes of faith, these babies could be seen as a special gift. It was a comforting thought. Leaving the church, Sarah felt lighter, as if the uncertainty had been replaced with a sense of purpose. She didn't have all the answers, but something told her that Lily and Rose were exactly as they were meant to be: pure, innocent, and perhaps touched by something divine. Months passed, and Sarah and John had grown accustomed to the mystery surrounding their twins. They had learned to live with the wonder and awe that Lily and Rose's white hair brought to their lives. The attention from strangers hadn't lessened, and each new encounter brought the same questions, but now Sarah and John smiled knowingly. They had come to peace with not having all the answers. But then, just when they thought the mystery might remain unsolved forever, everything changed. One afternoon, Sarah's cousin Beth came over for a visit. Beth was a family historian, someone who had always been fascinated by tracing their roots and uncovering long-forgotten stories. She had heard about the twins' unique appearance and was eager to meet them. As she held Lily and Rose, she marveled at their white hair, much like everyone else. But then, a thoughtful expression crossed her face. Beth began asking questions about their family history, specific ones that Sarah hadn't considered before. Had anyone in their distant lineage been born with unusual traits? Were these stories passed down that might hold clues? Sarah and John shook their heads, not knowing much beyond their immediate relatives. Intrigued, Beth promised to do some digging. She had access to old family records and thought it might be worth investigating. A few weeks later, Beth returned with news that left Sarah and John stunned. She had uncovered an old, nearly forgotten family record from generations ago. It revealed that they had once been a line of ancestors going back centuries who had been born with white hair. These individuals had been few and far between, and the trait had disappeared over time, seemingly lost to history. But now with Lily and Rose, it had resurfaced. Beth explained that the genetic trait was so rare, it occurred in 1 in a billion births. The fact that both twins carried this trait was nothing short of a miracle. Sarah and John sat in awe as the pieces of the puzzle finally came together. Their daughters were not only unique, but part of a lineage they never knew existed. It felt like a revelation, a confirmation that Lily and Rose were indeed special in ways they hadn't fully grasped before. In that moment, they realized this wasn't just a mystery. It was a gift, one that they would treasure for the rest of their lives. What are your thoughts on the twist we uncovered today? Comment your ideas below. Make sure to like and subscribe for a daily dose of drama and mystery. See you later with another twist.